Okay, love the crowd. Okay, I reworded the title of the talk a little bit. So what should you do with your old Drupal site? Hopefully everybody's in the right place. And hi, I'm Kristen. And if you want to reach me for anything, you can do hello@kristen.org. That'll work. I've been doing Drupal since 2004 and just had my 17th Drupalversary. Okay, so I'm going to keep the chat off for me, but if you want to introduce yourself, ask questions, answer questions, have fun in there, go for it. I already saw there was a lot of chatter, which is awesome. So just have fun there, but I'm going to be ignoring it for now. So when I was making this talk, I kind of wanted a theme, and there's this term that I learned, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago called forest bathing, and decided to kind of go with that. So when I was going and Unsplash and looking for pictures, I was looking for stuff that was things in the forest or very nature related. So you'll see that throughout, but I thought that was kind of a fun term that I learned not that long ago. So hopefully you all can do some forest bathing soon. So I'm going to start out with some numbers, looking at the state of Drupal and starting with built with. So built with is a great tool to kind of get an idea of a pulse on technology. And if you look at Drupal, you'll see that, you know, several years ago, there was a dip in usage, but it's been kind of holding steady. So I think people that are using Drupal, I don't think you need to worry too much about, you know, not having a job or, you know, that kind of thing. I think you should be pretty safe. There's still quite a bit of interest in Drupal, a lot of sites out there, which we'll get a better idea here. So on Drupal.org, if you have is it the update status module on? Can't remember, but you actually send information to Drupal.org so that they know what technology you're using. So in this case, Drupal 7 is quite huge, and over 600,000 websites that are using Drupal 7. And, you know, a fair amount of adoption for Drupal 8 and more recently Drupal 9. There are some big stragglers. We've got, you know, actually thousands of sites that are still on Drupal 6, 5, and even 4, which I did not include in this graph. So one thing, if you are considering moving on to Drupal 9, is a lot of times we use contributed projects, and we want to make sure that, you know, the ones that we like, the ones that we're using, are compatible with Drupal 9. So there's a way to check that out with a couple tools. This data is from one of them and gives you an idea of the adoption of, you know, porting over these modules to Drupal 9. We've got more than 5,000 that have been ported and about 4,500 that haven't. Of those, about 2,000 just need a one-line change, so really trivial, just trying to get those over the hump so they're officially supported, but you could make that one-line change yourself if you needed to. And then there's another about 1,500 that there are some automated tools that we can run in order to make those supported. So actually the contributed projects for Drupal 9 are in really good shape. If, you know, especially if you needed to tinker around with ones that aren't officially supported, you have ways of doing that. So as far as timelines, we've got Drupal 8. So EOL is end of life. We got Drupal 8 end of life coming up really soon, and that's a hard stop. We got Drupal 7 end of life that was extended until 2022 mostly because of COVID kind of disrupting the world. And then we also have, so we have a lot of stuff going on. Next year, we're going to have a Drupal 10 release already, which is sort of a bit surprising because Drupal 9 just came out not that long ago. And then we have Drupal 9 end of life in a couple of years. So just, you want to keep those in mind as we're kind of going through this. And that was a lot of dry data. So I'm throwing in a kitten for you so that you can reset and, you know, enjoy a little bit of forest bathing there with the cute kitty. So I've sort of structured it so that we have some questions so we can ask, some options related to that, and then some resources and tips that will go along with those questions and options. So if you have an old site, and actually in the chat, which I won't see, but you feel free to say what sites you're, what versions of sites you're working on now. That might be interesting to other people. You might be working on many different sites, and maybe even like where you think you might go with those sites. So you might feel like you're kind of, I don't know, a bit blocked. You're not sure, should I go under the tree, over the tree, just head back? I don't know, make my own path with a machete or something. You're not really sure like what you're supposed to be doing. So I think I really liked this quote: adopt the pace of nature, her secret is patience. So I think that's the big takeaway from this, is make sure that you are patient with yourself and with others when you're going through this transition. Sometimes the transition will be quite easy, and sometimes it will be, frankly, quite painful. So I think trying to support each other and be patient, just keep that in mind, especially for some of the bigger migrations. So one option I want to talk about is, are you okay with that site just poof, leaving, going into the ether? That might be an option, right? Do you really, really need that site? You can look at the stats, you can look at the traffic, you can look at the business value for that. Maybe that'll work. Maybe you don't actually need it. And I watched a talk recently where they were migrating, but they took the old documentation from the old CMS that they really, really didn't like, and they threw it in a fire. So, you could have some sort of cleansing ritual if you wanted to get rid of the old stuff, and be aware of fire laws wherever you are. I'm in California, and they're a little, dicey right now. Okay, so your options then, if you're like, yeah, I don't really need this site, just delete it. All right, that's pretty easy. Or something that you might not think of is maybe you could give it to somebody. I don't know, maybe someone else would find it useful. There are ways of doing that. Maybe you know someone, or you could advertise, or dump the code on GitHub or something and just kind of be like, yeah, this isn't supported, but here you go, have fun. And we've got, if we want to kind of like wash it off, some things you should keep in mind. Back up, at least do a temporary backup, at least initially. Maybe give yourself a little, cooling off period. You may be like, yeah, I'm going to delete it. And then you have regrets. So, back up. And then, once that, you can always, purge it, purge that backup later. And the most important thing for deleting things is caution, because, especially if you're a command line person, that RM minus RF, you don't want to be doing that, too much. So don't delete the wrong things. And I would really consider maybe not deleting it, but maybe archiving it somewhere. That might be a better option, which we'll talk about next. So maybe you don't really need the site online anymore, but I don't know, maybe you're a digital hoarder, or you just, maybe you'll look at it someday. Maybe someone will look at it someday, and you want it for posterity. So can you just store it somewhere? So there's two options for that. You could just take a snapshot of the static public facing pages, assuming this is a public site or internal site. You can basically crawl those. My husband just ran by. Or you can actually get all of the assets, so you can dump the database and grab the files, and do your typical kind of like Drupal dump, and store that, and so that you would be able to reinstall it if you wanted to. So some tools that you might use for this, and some of these are going to be very familiar. So the more familiar ones would be like Drush and Backup and Migrate. They have archiving options, things like that. Those would be pretty standard. One that I actually learned fairly recently is called HT-Track, and it just grabs the site. I mean, it's kind of similar using wget or something, but I haven't used it yet, but it was popping up in several conversations in the last couple weeks. So that seems like a good one to grab if you just wanted a snapshot. And one of the big takeaways here is you really want to make sure that you grabbed what you thought you grabbed. So I highly recommend actually, and if you're zipping this up and storing it in, I don't know, Dropbox or Google Drive or somewhere, taking that, unzipping it, looking at it, if you wanted the full backup, reinstalling it and making sure it actually is what you think, because we make mistakes and you may have a very useless archive. So one other question we can ask ourselves is, okay, well, maybe we have, we still want the site online. We like it. Maybe there's not a huge amount of traffic, or, it's more for, posterity, but we want it online. And that could be something that we consider, or maybe we just want it to be super fast and we, just want the lighthouse scores to go through the roof and, be like awesome. So there are a number of reasons why you maybe want the site to be, pretty much static, either fully static, which I'm calling just basically all you're having there is, HTML, CSS, and possibly JavaScript, but the JavaScript's, pretty benign. It's just kind of doing stuff on the pages, or a semi-static site where it's mostly static, but then you still have the option of some dynamic functionality where you're going and querying that Drupal site to get something or put something there. So some options for that. If you're going to go fully static, we talked about the HT-Track option. They're also super popular is Jekyll. And that one, if you kind of move to that model, a lot of times people use it so that they're using Markdown in order to edit stuff. So you wouldn't, you could basically move away from using Drupal as your content management system if it makes sense, and go in and use, have a Markdown version of the content. And, if you needed to go make changes, you could. Gatsby is hugely popular in Drupal. There are alternatives to that, like Gridsome, I think, and several others, but Gatsby has a lot of traction in Drupal land. So that might be an option for you. And that would give you a little bit more of that dynamic functionality if you needed it, be able to query, the Drupal site and put stuff there or grab stuff. And a really cool tool that you may have heard of is called Tome. And there's an alternative, which I wasn't familiar with until I made this talk, called Static Site Generator. So those are actually modules that you install on your site, and they allow you to sync your, either create a static site or actually even, sync between the changes that you have made in the site to the file system, which can then be, sent off to a hosting like Netlify is a popular one for that, which I think we touch upon in a bit. So maybe you're kind of done with Drupal. I mean, it's kind of sad, hate to see you go, but you want to use the right tool for the job, right? And maybe just Drupal's not doing it for you anymore. So that's okay. For that, you can, especially a smaller site, I mean, you could do a slightly bigger site, I guess, but usually a smaller site, there are many software as a service options that you can use, which we'll touch upon. Or maybe you like having that full CMS functionality, but you just want to go to a different CMS. So if you're going to go the SaaS route, I would just recommend, creating an account on some of the popular ones. You got Wix, Weebly, Squarespace. There's a lot of negative press around Wix these days. So just, you may want to Google that, the Wix versus WordPress thing. Kind of not cool, but it is an option out there if you want to evaluate things. There are plugins from going from Drupal to WordPress, and it was interesting finding this plugin because it says it actually supports going from Drupal 4 into WordPress all the way through Drupal 9, which was pretty impressive. It has pretty high reviews. Haven't used it myself, but it's an option. And of course, there's so many other CMSs that you could potentially migrate to. All right. So I don't know, maybe you just kind of like where you are. Maybe you're pretty happy with your Drupal, like you're on Drupal 7, you're pretty happy with it. Like the majority of people are on Drupal 7. And you're like, yeah, this is a pretty cool site. I like it. I don't really want to do much with it. Why do I have to do anything? And I put this picture in just as a break from all of the dry stuff. But when I think of Drupal 7, one thing I think of is backdrop, which we'll talk about. But then I think of Jen Lampton, and then I think of horses. So this is some horses for you in a beautiful, forest bathing setting. So if you're happy with your Drupal 7 site, maybe you just want to stay on it as long as possible. You're just like, just keep going, keep on trucking. So there is extended support that you can use. And I actually went this morning to the DrupalCon government summit, and the main keynote today was about extended support. So that was pretty cool. And they're going to support you until 2025. So you're like, I'm just going to cruise. Of course, there's a price tag associated with that. So you'd have to see if you can afford it. But there are several vendors that we'll talk about. Then another option is having going to Backdrop, which, although it's not technically Drupal 7, it's very, very similar to Drupal 7, and it's very easy, or pretty easy to be able to port to Drupal 7. So if you want something a little different but is very Drupal 7 like, then that is another option for you. So we've got several extended support vendors, and there's actually a session from Jen at 2 p.m. Pacific at this camp. So you could check that out if you wanted to learn more. And then there are ways, even if you're on older versions of Drupal, there are ways that you can, port your site from like 6 to 7, and then use 7, as is with extended support or moving to Backdrop. Well, maybe you're already kind of caught up. Maybe, you're not on Drupal 7, you're on Drupal 8, and you're, pretty ahead of the game. So for that option, if you have sites on Drupal 8, you should upgrade to Drupal 9, and your time is running out. You have until November. Other option is Invent a Time Machine, but that one might take a little bit. So fortunately, going from 8 to 9 is pretty easy, especially if you've kind of kept up with your minor versions. With Drupal 8, you just get to the last version, and there are a lot of resources at the end of this that I'll make the slides available later. There are a couple tools that are very useful if you're going from 8 to 9, and one of them is the upgrade status module. You install that on your site. It'll tell you which of your contributed modules are ready for Drupal 9. It'll say what your custom code is ready for Drupal 9, and it'll get you all ready so that you can address any issues and then move on. The deprecation status tool is that little pie chart I showed earlier. It'll just show you like what modules are supported or not supported. And maybe you're on 6 or 7 and you want to go to 9. So we have, okay. So if you have a simple site, this monkey maybe this monkey's happy, but if you have a more complicated site, just remember that patience thing we talked about. Okay, so options if you're going from 6 or 7 to 9. There is a kind of press the button option, which most people don't know about. So if you're actually happy with your structure, you can press the button and it'll just plunk everything over. Or the most common thing, if you have a site of any size, is you would rebuild the site in Drupal 9 however you like, with all the latest architecture, you know, fun stuff. And then you would use Migrate to the Migrate suite in order to move your site over. So some tips here. This monkey looks like he's biting his fingers because, you know, it can be a little bit scary when you're doing a big migration, but you want to audit this super important. Audit what you have and remove anything possible. Sorry, I'm going to say it again. Audit what you have and remove anything possible, because why do you want to bring over stuff that you don't care about? And yeah, so the automated option, if you're just a simple site, you like this site, I actually played with this option. I have a Drupal 6 site, which I thought I was going to get over to Drupal 9 before this talk, but didn't happen. Actually played with the automated option. It was pretty cool, and a couple of glitches, but it did end up working and moving all my blog posts over from 6 to 9 in a, you know, I was pretty happy with it, but I just needed to do theming and all that, so I haven't actually pressed the button. Then the most common thing, if you're going from 6 or 7 to 9, would be to use those migrate modules. And there's a whole number. There's some in core, but there are also a number of contributed modules that make things so much easier. And there's a lot of good documentation and videos and that kind of thing. So that one, you're going to have to get into the code and write some code. But a lot of times it's actually fairly straightforward. So remember, we're going to have patience. I liked this quote. We're going to try to smile, breathe, and go slowly through this process. And I've included a number of resources for you. I'll see if I can put this up on the session, but we have a number of tools here. So we talked about backup and migrate. We've talked about the HT track, Jekyll, and so forth. So I've broken this out into different sections. These are going off to the tool itself, those links. And then we've got a section that's videos, and did one that hasn't been added here, but also, you know, if you're more visual, you prefer a video, there's a number of options there. Oh, including one I gave at DrupalCon last year, which is the preparing you and your site for Drupal 9. So if you are going from 6, 7, 8 to 9, you could watch that one. I will say that was the beginning of the pandemic, and I was actually doing it from a closet and very hot. So I'm not super pleased with that video, but it's fine. It's functional. And we've got a bunch of blog posts, and then we got like the real docs, right? All the different docs that you can go to. One that's super helpful if you are going from an older version of Drupal to Drupal 9 is the known issues when upgrading, but just tons of documentation in order to get you where you want to go. So hopefully that gave a little bit of sunlight onto your different options of your Drupal site and where you might want to go. Obviously, you're going to still need to do some homework and maybe look at some of these resources and figure out the right fit for you. But the whole point of this talk was really just to see like what are the different options available and what you might want to explore. So with that, I've got a funny squirrel saying thanks, and you can find me on Twitter too much at Kristen_Pohl or LinkedIn at Kristen without the _ These slides are from SlidesGo, which is pretty cool. If you're doing a presentation and you want some free slides, pretty awesome. And then the images are mostly from Unsplash. So with that, I think I went really fast. So we have time for some questions, and we have some migration experts here, like Daryl as well. So I think we can probably pool our knowledge and help answer things. So I'm going to jump out of presentation mode, and I'm going to try to, oopsies. Oh, yeah, it's being funny. Hold on a sec. I've got Zoom covering, there we go. Okay. All right, now we're just us. Okay. You are welcome to unmute and be part of the conversation, or I can look at chat and see what we had here. We have any questions, or, you know, not even just questions, horror stories, words of wisdom. You know, we're all friends here, so we can use this as a little bit of a migration support group, if that makes sense. So, oh, we got a raised hand. Yeah.
Well, number one, thank you. That was a lot of resources and a lot of valuable information. Yeah, I took a lot of screenshots. But I was curious if you'd be able to share either the deck or that specifically the resources that you linked, just so we don't have to hunt it down.
Yeah, I'm going to try to see if I can make a PDF and then stick it up on the Stanford my session page for the camp, and I'll try to put them there. And yeah, there's a lot. And also the other thing is, if you have a favorite resource, there's something missing, if there's something incorrect on the slides or whatever, just feel free to ping me. I can update those and, you know, make sure that they're, you know, the most beneficial to everybody. But I will try to do that today. I'll give my deadline of today so that I don't forget, that I'll get those up by today.
Well, thank you. And I do have one kind of whatever question. What exactly do you mean by end of life when you were showing the timeline in terms of like Drupal 7, Drupal 8? Yeah. You know, yeah. So exactly what are kind of the ramifications for that?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. Okay, so end of life doesn't mean poof, the software's gone, right? It's still there, but it's not going to get security coverage. So with Drupal 8, the reason why Drupal 8 is earlier than Drupal 7 for the end of life is because Drupal 8 depends on some dependencies like Symfony and other things, and those are going end of life because they don't want to support them anymore. So then we have to go end of life for Drupal 8 this year. But yeah, the end of life is just kind of like we're done, you know, at least like the core team and the security team, they're like, we're probably not going to be looking at this stuff anymore. You're kind of on your own world out there with all the things. So if you go it alone and don't do like the extended support vendor, which, I mean, hopefully you don't do, but I mean, I'm sure people do it. There'll be security patches that end up going out, you know, like say you on Drupal 7, you don't do extended support, and then you're going to have to be monitoring, you know, like all of Drupal 7, all the contributed space everywhere, like trying to figure out, oh, did someone add a security patch? And then you're going to have to add the patch yourself. So it's a little nerve-wracking to go that route. But it boils down to just, yeah, just not going to support anymore, and especially the security aspect of it. Oh, I think Daryl.
Yeah, and it's not just the security support. There are all kinds of other non-support issues that will come up. So, for example, the what level of PHP you're running. I had a Drupal 6 site that had an Ubercart store in it, and Authorize.net dropped support for security protocol TLS 1.1. You had to have at least 1.2, and I needed a higher level of PHP to run that. So it was this whole thing that got carried along.
Yeah.
it's not just the security, which is very important, of course,
Yeah.
but it's also just technology marches on, and you could get left behind.
Yeah.
And then you actually have to spend development hours just to fix things that weren't broken before, but you can't support anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's a really excellent point. So it's, I mean, similar. I was saying that the dependencies for Drupal 8, but it's the same thing, like Daryl said, for, you know, Drupal 7, it still depends on other stuff, right? Like PHP and that kind of stuff. So yeah, excellent point. Thanks, Daryl. Feel free to just chime in with other questions.
Well, I have them if
Awesome.
no one else
Go
does.
in.
Do you, so, I mean, number one, yeah, a lot of the tools I'm definitely want to dig into in terms of, you know, transferring from most of the sites that we're looking at are on Drupal 7 and getting that upgraded to Drupal 9. And of course, yes, I agree with the audit the site before you move everything. But on the cases that say we want to move platforms altogether, so like move it to WordPress, obviously that's basically a rebuild, but in that scenario, do you have any recommendations about just output like the Drupal database basically? So you just have like a spreadsheet of the content, or just like a static kind of site sucker file and rebuild from there?
My understanding, and I haven't done that, so to be clear, I haven't done every single one of these options, right? I research stuff and figure out what people do, and I know people that have done the WordPress option, but that certain plugin, I'm assuming it would actually read from the database, and it would know the database structure and then would pull it out, rather than you having to export that out into sort of flat files or anything. If anyone's used that WordPress option, and if it's different than that, feel free to chime in, or if you know that that's the correct thing. But the whole point of that plugin is trying to make it easy for you, right?
Yeah, any way to kind of automate it instead of manually rebuilding every single page would be ideal, but
Yeah,
may just be the case.
yeah, and I don't know, maybe, yeah, I should actually, it would be fun to, I haven't done a lot with WordPress, but it might be fun to, you know, take it, my D6 site, and then just try to suck it into WordPress and see what it looks like, because it's basically a blog site for my personal one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks for the questions. Anyone else have questions? You're welcome just to put them in chat if you're feeling a bit shy, or in an environment that's not really video or audio conducive, which a lot of us have been in those the last year plus. Yeah, happy to see a lot of faces I know and new faces. Thanks, Christina. I really appreciate having the face and the questions. I mean, I could give you 10 minutes of your time back, unless Daryl, did you want to chime in? What migrations are you doing right now?
I'm working on part of a Drupal 8 migration to Drupal 8 from Drupal 7, which seems kind of, given the timeline, is kind of weird, but they're anticipating going directly to Drupal 9 from 8. Right. But they're still, the Drupal 7 site is live. They're still making changes to it. They're actually still changing the structure. So the migration has to change to support that.
No
yeah.
content freeze, huh?
What's that? No content freeze? What would that be?
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Moving target. That sounds fun.
Always.
All right. So you're keeping things real over there.
Mm.
And Daryl and I go way back in Santa Cruz land, and same with Amy June. So okay. Any words of wisdom, Daryl, because you are the migration master?
Words of wisdom. Yeah, keep it simple. Do you actually, so you were doing all this research on how to upgrade from 6 to 9. There are, with each release of Drupal, there are certain go-to modules or subsystems that people use, and those things change over time to support the same kinds of functionality. So in 6 and 7, you had field collection, and then 7 and 8, you have paragraphs, and now there's form builder and so forth. And this is a generic kind of a problem that people have, how to deal with that and how to make the right choice with like a view to the future.
Right. No, that is like, I think one of the hardest problems of going from the older versions into Drupal 9 or 8, because I mean, it has a similar structure. And, you know, I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all, but Layout Builder has become pretty good and pretty stable.
And it's in core.
And it's in core, so it'll be more supported than, you know, other contributed things. So definitely, if you haven't played with Layout Builder, give it, you know, try it out, see what you like. You know, if your content editors like it, it is a different kind of feel than some of the kind of WYSIWYG things. It's more the layout, and you kind of plunk things in. You can use add-on modules to kind of tune it down so they can't like pick everything under the sun. But yeah, so I know that some people are keeping some, or they might be reworking the paragraphs, but keeping some paragraphs, but putting them into Layout Builder. So there is a fair number of sites that do that model. Some are just ditching paragraphs and doing just blocks. So just adding, you know, fields to blocks and kind of using it in the same manner of that we would normally use with paragraphs. The thing about paragraphs is it has all this ecosystem of all these like cool things. So we're kind of like, oh, we kind of want to still have that stuff. So
it's also very heavyweight though.
It is very heavyweight. Yeah. So I've helped with a number of audits over the years, and I feel like every single site, the performance for paragraphs was an issue. So especially because they were like nesting and that kind of thing.
Right. Every time you edit a node, then it resaves all of those in a new revision.
Yeah.
Which is can be an advantage, can be what you want it to do. But if it's not what you want it to do, then it's it can be a problem.
Yeah. So I mean, I love paragraphs. Love it. I'm a big fan. But you know, I don't know. If it was my choice, I would strongly consider trying to do it with core only and doing
paragraphs is a pain to migrate into too.
Yeah, well, you're gonna still have pain migrating into blocks and things too. The migration will probably be just
blocks don't require ERR support.
Oh,
entity, and I can never remember what that means. Entity,
actually, thanks
revision.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking. Reference revision.
Reference revision.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So I heard something. So I went to this end of life talk at the government summit earlier today, which was awesome. Yeah. So Irina has some. The Layout Builder and paragraphs. Yeah, that's an option. Right, and then you don't necessarily have to do the nested, though you can still do the nested that way. But oh shoot, what was it? Oh, so the revisions thing. So one tip that I heard earlier, which I mean, I've recommended occasionally, but sometimes people are data hoarders, so it's a little hard. But if you could only not port over all your revisions, then that's huge, right? You're like, hey, content editors, sorry that this new site's we're starting, you know, from whatever the latest version is, and not have all that old crap. So that's another way of kind of, you know, trimming things down and starting fresh. So I thought, yeah, I mean, I've done that, and it was a good reminder. Yeah, that's a really good tip. Yeah, exactly. Still nest them. So yeah, definitely that. If you're going to go to Drupal 9, I highly recommend you watch a number of paragraphs versus Layout Builder, which is better, because it's really boils down to your use case, your content editors, your comfort level. I can't just say, yeah, you do it this way. There's so many, especially like at last DrupalCon, so many talks like that'll just, get you thinking like, okay, what makes sense for you?
I had a quick workflow kind of question. So when, assuming you are migrating from 7 to 9 or 8 to 9, what are kind of your tips on, or just downtime of the site? Like, is it even possible to upgrade in kind of the background and still have like a live version of the old site? Just to limit the downtime.
Yeah, the cutover. That's an excellent question. And that's something that, especially if you're doing a slightly larger migration where you don't want, and maybe you have a lot of traffic and you don't want too much downtime, you're truly trying to get that really, really tight. So, so what I'm used to is larger sites. So what we do are called incremental migrations. So you would build the new site in Drupal 9, and you would migrate over whatever the state of the site was at that point, right? So you have kind of a starting point. And then your team's building stuff or tweaking stuff or theming or whatever they're doing, and you're getting a feel like, okay, is the Drupal 9 site kind of where I want it? Then maybe in the middle of all that, you do an incremental migration, which means it just grabs over the last chunk that you didn't have, right? And then maybe you keep going, and depending on the length of your project, right, you can do these incrementals, and it could chunk for a while, even hours, or we've had days for some. So you need to be careful. So, but the trick is right before you're going to go live, you do an incremental, right, but very close to that go live date, and try to grab as much as possible. You keep the live site still going, so there's still going to be some more stuff, right? But so you get right down to that deadline, do that. So if you have a big incremental to do, you try to do that like a few days beforehand, right? Get the big chunk, and then you'll have that little bit. Then right before you cut over, you're going to do that so then you're going to have to shut it off, not let any change, or just actually you can just tell your team like, hey, don't touch anything, or unless you have like external users that are adding stuff. And then you do that last incremental, which hopefully is really small, so it doesn't take too long. And then you can do your DNS cutover. There are a lot of really good resources for like launch plans. So if you just Google like Drupal launch, just Drupal launch, there are a number of really nice blog posts and things that have like all the steps that you really should be thinking about when you're doing that cutover, because it can be kind of nerve-wracking, right? And you want it really smooth and make sure that you've got all the steps down. Now, not all of those might have like the migration aspect of it. So definitely, if you find any that are more migration focused, that would be good.
Thank you. And you said that was like Drupal launch, just look for.
If you just Google Drupal launch, look for some blog posts. There's been some good ones. Thanks, Amy June. Bye. So there's so many great resources out there. And if you don't, bye, Jordana. If you don't find, if you have a question, just feel free to email me or ping me on Twitter, or I don't know if you're in the Drupal Slack. It's another way to get a hold of me. But yeah, happy to have DMs or whatever.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I will make use of general documentation before I'm like, teach me all the things. So, but thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done everything. Like I said, I put some things in there that I haven't played with, but that seemed to be pretty popular. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we made it to time because we had a fun Q&A. So thanks to Christina and Daryl, and then in the chats we had some things going on too. So thanks to everyone who participated in that, and for the people that were just hanging out and watching. And I think we have Marian, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, just thank you, Kristen. That was great.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, thanks everyone, and I hope you are doing so well as possible, given all this world we live in. So yeah, hope everyone can do some forest bathing soon, bring it down a notch, and take a deep breath. All right, bye.